Thank you so much, Liana, and thank you also, Vice Chancellor, or Chancellor, now I forgot, for the introduction. That really, was a great introduction for what I'm going to talk about. Building inclusive, collaborative research practices through integrative methodologies. I will be talking a lot, but I will also be asking you to do some talking with neighbors or in the plenary form, because I think interdisciplinarity is something we all do. We all have ideas about, opinions about, so let's share them. I started working in an interdisciplinary way already as a student. I chose women's studies back in the 90s as my first degree, and then I moved to philosophy of science. So I was always in an implicitly interdisciplinary environment. And then I got an assignment in 2021 from our chancellor, who asked me to make Utrecht in the educational domain a more interdisciplinary place. So I had 3 assignments: make sure that the interdisciplinary education we offer is of the highest quality. So I worked with evidence-informed interdisciplinary education, etc. Make sure that more teachers design, deliver and evaluate interdisciplinary education, and make sure that more students take the education. Because of this assignment, I started working really hard on what interdisciplinarity actually is, and how it is more than meeting people and having these serendipitous conversations. That's the very start of interdisciplinary collaboration, absolutely. That's also your goal, your aim for this conference. But there's more to it. There's a whole world out there that has theorized interdisciplinarity and that has developed all kinds of methodologies. And that's what I'm going to talk you through today. So in my abstract, you've seen that I will focus on integration, this very important core of interdisciplinarity. Probably you've all had conversations about what's the difference between multi, inter, and transdisciplinarity. Multidisciplinarity, adding, comparing perspectives. Interdisciplinarity, making sure that knowledges and insights from different disciplinary perspectives are being integrated. And transdisciplinarity is the space wherein we work together, not just as scholars, as academics, but we also work with societal partners. We can do that in a multidisciplinary way by just comparing perspectives, but we can also do that in an integrative way by really, taking very seriously what the activists and the neighbors and the nurses and what they have to say and bringing them into your projects. So I will take you through very quickly a positioning exercise, both reflexive and diffractive. I will talk about interdisciplinarity as something that has a history, as something that has an epistemology, as something that has a social dimension. I will talk about some of the forgotten functions of interdisciplinarity that lots of universities now want to bring back to their institutions. And then I will talk about interdisciplinarity beyond the magic, these magic connections. I want to bring in methodologies and techniques for making these aspirations we have with interdisciplinarity into a reality. And then later on, I will talk about something that some people say is a new profession or should become a new profession, the profession of the integration expert. And I'm hoping to do this in 45 minutes. I'm not quite sure about the timeline, but I will talk fast. So my colleague Anastasia Hakopian, she works in interdisciplinary studies, has developed a research-based learning activity on positionality statements. The QR code is there. I will make sure that the PowerPoint gets circulated, so just write down whatever you find interesting. The main question she has, or the starting point of her exercise is that students should learn to critically reflect on their own disciplinary and sociocultural positioning in the research process. And she wants students, I mean, we work a lot on students doing interdisciplinary research. She wants students to discuss who are you and what does your perspective contribute to your research. She's developed the identity wheel for it, you know, the wheel that provides all the differences and similarities, all the identity components that you bring to scholarship, of which disciplinarity is one. So take a minute. I will really constrain you on time to quickly think about and maybe say a few words on who you are to your neighbor, who you are and what your perspective contributes to any research project. And I'll time the minute. The minute starts now. Okay, that was the 1 minute sign.
11:15.
Yeah. That was the 1 minute sign. Colleagues, as I said, just 1 minute. And you've got 2 days to do all this talking. I decided to start with this positionality exercise because on the one hand, it's very important for interdisciplinary collaboration. Where do I come from? Where does the other come from? And how are our perspectives complementary? How are they different, etc.? And this is this kind of reflection is what we're starting to do in positionality statements in academic articles. But interestingly enough, they're very focused on the individual. So whereas they are important, seem to be important as a starting point for interdisciplinary research, the positionality statement kind of literature that is out there is very much focused on the single researcher. We're not going to do the next exercise, but it was maybe 2 weeks ago that another colleague of mine, a former student of mine, Evelien Geerts, was here at BNU giving a lecture, also invited by Liana, not about a reflexive positionality exercise, but a diffractive one in which you immediately start from this idea that what you bring to a research collaboration is not some individual essence, some individual quality, some identity marker, but that these essences, I mean, they're no longer essences, these qualities, these identities change given the particular research collaboration, the group. You know, what comes out of as a part of you depends on the group, and it also depends on the particular research topic, the phenomenon, the question, the challenge that you're working on. So I really would like to kind of invite you to, over these days, reflect on what do I bring to the table, but also what do I bring to the table given the particular person I'm talking to, given the particular topic that I'm discussing, because in interdisciplinary settings, it's not just you, it is always a collaboration, an encounter, and a specific engagement. Okay, so just some kind of now that we've done this little opening kind of this opening exercise, what are the objectives of interdisciplinarity, of interdisciplinary research, and also the teaching of interdisciplinary research? This discussion actually it's been a long discussion already, And one of the sources that I tend to return to is a book simply called Interdisciplinarity. It was published in, this book was published in 1972 by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And in that book, some 30 scholars reflect, mostly men, by the way, which is a pity because mostly women work in interdisciplinarity today, in which these 30 people reflect on what interdisciplinarity is and what it could be. And there's 100 adjectives to interdisciplinarity in that book, but there's 3 main ones: instrumental interdisciplinarity, critical interdisciplinarity, and purposeful interdisciplinarity. And I think we found these 3 main categories in the introduction of today's conference. So instrumental interdisciplinarity means that interdisciplinarity is a means of solving complex scientific and societal problems, or to better understand them. So this solving problems, solving complex problems, sometimes you just first have to understand the problem. Then there's critical interdisciplinarity, which is a way of questioning boundaries, disciplinary boundaries, and associated assumptions and power structures between disciplines. There's a hierarchy of disciplines around, where very often, you know, the natural sciences and the quantitative social sciences are at the top. Read the newspaper, where these fields are represented more under the heading of science than, for example, literature. And then there's purposeful interdisciplinarity, and I think in the introduction we heard a lot about that, which is the conscious and value-laden pursuit of projects or organizations aimed at specific social or ethical goals, where you're really saying, you know, as a university, we have a societal function, and we want to fulfill that function by organizing our research and our knowledge production in a certain way. So instrumental, critical, and purposeful interdisciplinarity as main categories, for the objectives of interdisciplinarity. Then a bit of the history. I'm not a historian. I'm a philosopher of science with a strong gender studies background. But when you read about the history of the concept or the idea of interdisciplinarity, 2 things pop up. First of all, that it is, it is young, just like disciplines are quite young, 19th century. But it is older, it is even younger than the word integration. So integration as this very technical aspect of making sure that different knowledges, different insights come together was entered the academic stage before interdisciplinarity as a word, as a rubric. So integration, synthesis, unification, unity of science, you know, we've all probably heard about this, was there first. And then interdisciplinarity as a concept dates back to the 1920s, where informal discussions between sociologists, psychologists, and educational scientists in the US coined this term. And of course, terms are always coined at different places, usually at the same time, at more or less the same time. But when you go to the etymology of interdisciplinarity, we tend to go to the 1920s first, then to the 1940s with the Manhattan Project. I always find it important to notice this, to mention this, and to notice that interdisciplinarity in that sense is not neutral, and it is also not, what did I write down, innocent. So, you know, there are quite some heavily political histories kind of folded into this kind of ideal that I think at this point all universities in the world have interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity in their mission. You see, for example, that in China, in India, like there's been the governments have, and the ministries of education and research have kind of placed interdisciplinarity into very serious university and education reforms, for example. So we're really all doing this, but it is not an innocent project. And then another kind of temporal marker, the 1970s, very much something that is in my own academic history, part of my own academic identity, where all kinds of movements, feminist movements, black movements, student movements, labor movements, started to ask questions, started to notice things, and then when these participants were also going to college or university, they realized, hey, but the knowledge that we are building is not reflected in our curricula. Maybe we should start to teach, think, and research differently. Okay, there's a famous there's a woman who's quite famous in the world of interdisciplinary studies. Her name is Julie Thompson Klein. And she says clearly in her book, Interdisciplinarity, all these books are very foundational, so they just have interdisciplinarity as the title. She says clearly integrative was a higher and more powerful category than interdisciplinary, which signified in this case the combining of established categories, methods, and perspectives. So she really writes a lot about the real technicality of what it means to collaborate across disciplinary borders. So, and I'm emphasizing this so much because very often when we teach in an interdisciplinary way, we just divide the group of students into groups in which students come from different disciplines, and we're like, collaborate, find yourself a phenomenon, find yourself a problem, a challenge, and just do it. But very often we're giving them a quite impossible task. So the technicality, the methodology is very important for me. And she says that when you talk about interdisciplinarity and integration, there's 3 registers. I talked about the 3 objectives. Now I talk about the 3 registers. And these registers are historical, epistemic, and social. So the historical kind of dimension or register is, of course, the ongoing dynamics of disciplining, interdisciplining, neo-disciplining, and the fact that this goes on and on. For example, gender studies, I mentioned it before, can be called a neo-discipline, where first, the biology of sex, the social cultural nature of gender, like the gendered symbolic order, etc., were all brought together. Different disciplines came together, and now gender studies has a canon and has methodologies of its own. So disciplining, interdisciplining, neo-disciplining, the main example of a neo-discipline is biochemistry. It's always in the textbook example. Then there's the epistemic register, where interdisciplinarity is about different epistemologies, assumptions about the natural, cultural, nature-cultural world, concepts, vocabulary, theories, methods, etc. So these come together, or they are supposed to come together, and the idea that we kind of unravel, in a very methodic way, we unravel the overlaps, the differences between all these different kind of layers of what a discipline is, that makes interdisciplinarity a quite technical thing. Students can really enter into conflicts and have, the deep conversations about the question that they're asking. Can be slowed down or even stopped because of, the fact that they stumble upon like unintegratable assumptions about the world. And then, are they really learning, for example? And this can also happen in research groups. And then, of course, there's the social register, the social dimension, in which interdisciplinarity is about communities of researchers, teachers, learners, that at some point start to talk the same language, and this can also be the language of interdisciplinarity. There's associations out there, the Association for Interdisciplinary Studies. There's alliances out there, the Global Alliance for Inter- and Transdisciplinarity. So there's a lot. There's a lot going on. Oops, what am I doing? Yes. Then Julie Thompson-Klein is also talking, and that's her book, Interdisciplinarity, History, Theory, and Practice. She's also talking about the fact that with the becoming popular of interdisciplinarity as a word, there are several key functions of integration were swiftly forgotten or ceased to be discussed, and these functions are restructuring fields in theoretic terms, transcending institutionalism by providing a theoretical coherence, producing a new system for the division of labor at universities or across university walls, and distributing resources based on a set of explicit ordering principles. Lots of words, lots of technical terms, lots of ambition, but maybe take, and this is a book already from the 1990s, and I think we're still there, you know, where interdisciplinarity is an aim, but are we really discussing these things? So a quick, let's say 2-minute task for you to again talk to your neighbor. How are these functions of integration, of interdisciplinarity, emancipatory? What does it mean to restructure a field in theoretic terms? And how can that be something that emancipates either researchers or students? I'm putting the timer at 2 minutes here. Okay, you probably heard the timer. You probably heard the timer. I'm under time stress, so you know, which is good. I heard, you know, from this corner, I heard quite some interesting conversations, and again, you're going to have 2 days at least to discuss these things. For me, it is very important to have the conversation about interdisciplinarity in a deep way, especially at a university like this one, where we're also going to make the switch to the shift to more research, a more research-intensive space, maybe also more interdisciplinary space. You were really encouraged to pick up those ambitions. And at most universities, these ambitions are there, but they're not really thought through. A conference I organized in 2024 had the cheeky title Inter and Transdisciplinarity Beyond Buzzwords, because quite often there's a buzzwordiness, if that's a word, about inter and transdisciplinarity. And also the subtitle, Educational Pathways for Sustainable Research Collaborations. There was also a bit of a kind of critique into this subtitle, because very often our students know more about interdisciplinarity. They have more real life experience of it than we do as researchers. So take the theory, the history, the technicality of interdisciplinarity seriously, but also take your students very seriously if you want to do interdisciplinarity well. So what does it mean to do interdisciplinarity well? In the last 4-5 years, I've been collecting methodologies that have been developed specifically for interdisciplinarity. And I call these integrative methodologies. So Liana brought her copy of the book I wrote about this topic, Key Texts on Interdisciplinary Higher Education. There's another interesting volume, the Handbook of Interdisciplinary Teaching and Administration by Rick Sostek, in which I have a chapter in which I and also my colleagues talk about at least 10 methodologies that can be used in interdisciplinary research practices, and that can also be used, so research methodologies that can be used for educational design across disciplinary boundaries. So Repko and Sostek's interdisciplinary research process is an interesting one. It's a 10-step process that is quite recognizable when you know something about a research process. But what they've done in the Association of Interdisciplinary Studies, they basically collected back in the 80s, they collected experiences from interdisciplinary researchers and came up with their 10 steps. A couple of years later, their book is now down to the 5th edition. Couple of years later, they compared their steps with what we know from cognitive science. A couple of years later, they compared what they've learned with creativity research. And now they have also included stuff that interdisciplinarians have used in their work with students. So they keep enriching their 10-step methodology. There's traveling concepts from the Dutch humanist Mieke Bal, who talks about how you can do very deep reflections, diffractions on like how some disciplines use the same concept use a concept for a phenomenon that is also studied by another discipline that uses a different concept for it, or two disciplines use the same concept but for different phenomena. So, and also she talks about how you can pick up a concept from discipline 1 and insert it in an interesting way, in a productive way in discipline 2. So all these things, well, design thinking you've probably heard of, systems thinking you've probably heard of, big history, futuring, arts-based research, object orientation, like doing interdisciplinary work with an object, either by trying to take all the disciplinary perspectives, taking them out of the object, or by projecting different disciplinary perspectives onto an object. That is something that also works well as conversation starters. And then there's more. So these are methodologies that you can productively use. There's also integrative or integration techniques. So these are techniques for when you're deep into an interdisciplinary collaborative project and you stumble upon differences, different concepts, different knowledges, different insights, different ways of phrasing things, etc., and you want to move on. So this is really what Julie Thompson-Klein talks about, and what has now been operationalized by, again, Repko and Sostek, and some others have also, the last ones are 2 students. So redefinition means that when you're in an interdisciplinary collaboration, you can decide that concepts are flexible, that you redefine certain concepts in order to create common ground, a common language with which that can carry the different disciplinary insights. You can make the kind of terrain of a certain concept either larger or smaller, depending on, you know, what you have on the table or in your heads. Organization is the technique that you can call mind mapping or mapping out insights, finding causal relations, for example, between insights from different disciplines. Either you find causal relations or you create them, or you use micro, meso, macro, etc., like all of these organization techniques. Transformation is a way of dealing with opposition, binary oppositions, where you create a spectrum out of an opposing ideas, and you use a word for the spectrum. You develop a word for the spectrum that can carry all the different insights. And distinguishing basically means we're not going to integrate. We're going to talk about the fact that, you know, sometimes we just disagree, or you know, an information scientist, a computer scientist, and maybe a third one that I, from the top of my head, cannot think about right now. They can just have a different idea of what information is or what data is, and you're just going to call that data 1 and data 2 and be explicit about the difference. given there's no time for me to show you a clip that we've developed for students and staff. Liana will circulate it, in which, with an example, we watch viewers through what it means to work with interdisciplinary techniques. Go. Then, and these are my last 3 slides. Of course, oops, what's going on? Yeah. Of course, we do interdisciplinarity, especially in educational contexts. We do it for a reason. So why do we want to do interdisciplinary research, or why do we want to teach interdisciplinary research to students? How do you, when this university becomes a more research intensive space, when you're going to collaborate more, what do you get out of it? In the literature, there's 2 concepts that are now gaining traction. I guess that's the formulation. One is epistemic fluency. It's a concept that comes out of Australia, where there's a lot of research has been done on interdisciplinarity in research and in professional contexts. That's actually maybe an interesting word for you, interprofessional collaboration, where, you know, the doctor, the nurse, the physiotherapist, etc., work together. What they mean with a body is the same, but they work with that body differently. They don't mean the body politic or a body of literature, for example. Anyway, so that's interprofessional. So epistemic fluency means you're becoming increasingly adept at reflecting on what is involved in working across disciplinary or specialist boundaries. This serves or is served by team members, multicultural backgrounds, can be multicultural backgrounds, their backgrounds. Integration expertise means you're well on your way to becoming an integration expert that knows how to keep a team together. So epistemic fluency is a broader concept. It has also, I'll show you later in a second, it also has to do with like the where and the when of the research, and integration expertise means you're doing something when you're around a table, collaborating. I find this a very interesting table, so to speak. It was drawn up by Lina Markauskaite, Nancy Spence and Peter Goodyear, all from Australia, and they published it in a handbook, an encyclopedia actually, the Encyclopedia for Inter and Transdisciplinarity, in which they say that becoming epistemically fluent in interdisciplinary practices means you know how to work with different kinds of knowledge. You know, that's the interdisciplinary kind of core, the technicality. You know how to engage in different ways of knowing, same. You know how to create and sustain epistemic environments. Like, think about the simple fact that you're collaborating across campuses. You've set up, you know, during a specific kind of brainstorming session, you've set up a Google Doc, and someone has to just make sure that it's being kept alive, because you're going home, etc. You don't encounter each other in the hallway, you don't teach together. And the fourth aspect is being attuned to self, others, and the environment. So, you know, that's more the also well-being aspect of epistemic fluency. And these things you can become aware of, you can create words for, you can teach. And it helps. It helps you develop into a different kind of scholar. It helps you develop students into a different kind of professional. And this is why we all do it as well. And then there is this word integration expertise. This is an interesting article, Integrate the Integrators. Sorry, I didn't put the QR code. A call for establishing academic careers for integration experts. It's a bit of a manifesto for taking up integration expertise as a professional role. We can do that ourselves, but we can also teach it to students. And the integration expertise literature I find very interesting because what Sabine Hoffmann and her colleagues, what they say is, in order to be a good integration expert, in order to function as an integration expert in a collaborative, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary research project, you need to know what it means to wear disciplinary glasses, but you're just not wearing them when you're in the collaboration, when you're around the table, digitally or physically. Because you're taking on the role of the bridge builder, the boundary crosser, the translator, the catalyst, the facilitator, the contributor, which is, you know, a bit strange because there you are contributing, the mediator, the advisor, the evaluator. And what Sabine Hoffmann says is, it is very important to, as part of a collaboration, have someone around the table, at the table, that has this expertise or that uses the project to gain that expertise. Because when there's someone who's playing the role of facilitating the conversation, the other collaborators can bring in their disciplinary professional knowledges and can just be the disciplinary expert that they are. And then the integration expert is, you know, signaling, hey, here something goes wrong. Maybe we have to, you know, change the vocabulary. You know, maybe we have to take a break because there seems to be, you know, whatever these people do, they're doing the integration. They're helping with the integration. And there's a whole literature out there about this. Let's skip that one. Because then we have 10 minutes for a conversation, or maybe 5 minutes when we end a bit earlier. The QR code to my book is there. It is in the library of BNU. And this is the last thing I want to tell you. Alongside the book, we've created an online platform that has lots of teaching and learning materials. All of them about the integration techniques. Anastasia's positionality exercise is also on there. So when you're interested, please take a look at these open access materials. That's it.